What I'm going to talk to you about today, the theme of the day that we were given was this idea of missing. And of course, missing ties in very neatly with the work of the Commission. And so what I'm going to focus on today is obviously missing in terms of the local area, with a focus on the Chatham Naval Memorial. Just really briefly at the start, and for some of you I know this will be old ground, but I'm just very quickly going to whiz through a little bit about the history of the Commission and how we came to have this focus on the fallen of the First and Second World Wars, and particularly this idea of how we commemorate the missing in this country. So the chap in the middle here, Sir Fabian Ware, he is our hero at the Commission. The fact that he is not more widely known across the world or even in this country, to my mind, is a crime. He is very much kind of single-handedly responsible for what you understand to be our work. That wasn't me. To be our work, and very much how we remember and how we do remembrance in this country very much stems from the very early work that Ware did during the First World War. When the war broke out, he was too old for active service, but he became the commander of a mobile Red Cross unit, so he was driving ambulances out in northern France with a team there ferrying casualties around. The image there on the left will be familiar to many of you if you are interested in the First World War. A kind of a very typical early, perhaps a filled-in shell hole, a roadside cemetery, very rudimentary crosses. Those graves are marked, but with wooden markers, and very often the names on those are just written in pencil. Ware very quickly discovered that nobody was actually recording where these graves were and who was buried in them. And he and his team began to do that work as early as about November 1914, actually, which a lot of people don't realise it did kind of really start that early. To cut a very long story short, of course, that work only grew across the course of the war. The Imperial War Graves Commission is founded in May of 1917, and some of the early cemeteries did begin to be built before the armistice, but of course the huge job then of using those records and turning what you see on the left here into what you see on the right there began in earnest. And I'm sure many of you will have visited our largest site, Tynecott in Belgium, where there's 12,000 burials from the First World War. So in terms of who we commemorate any man or woman who was serving obviously in the recognised armed forces, the merchant navy, and a big old list of recognised auxiliary services. If they were in service within our dates of responsibility and they died during that time, or having been discharged but still within that time period of an illness or an injury that they had received while on service, then they would qualify for one of our headstones. As you can see, we are a global organisation. Those casualties from both wars are spread across the entire world. We operate in 150 different countries in 23,000 different locations. So it really is a global effort. So in terms of this idea of the missing, again, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with these images and may well have visited these. These are our two biggest memorials to the missing. And at the end of the First World War, we're looking at about 1.1 million casualties, Commonwealth casualties, Empire casualties, and getting on for half of those had no known grave. Okay, so you're looking at around 500,000 people who, for many different reasons, have not been able to be buried correctly, and for us to be able to fulfil our promise to commemorate every individual by name. This this issue really taxed the Commission to begin with, because obviously nothing on this scale had happened before. How do you go about fulfilling that promise to commemorate every casualty by name if you don't have a grave for them? The answer seems kind of obvious now, doesn't it? You build a really beautiful memorial and you put those names on there, and you work under the principle, Plumer's famous words from when the Menin Gate was unveiled in 1927, he is not missing, he is here. That idea that a bereaved family can go and see that name. They may not have a grave, but they have a place that they can go and they can see that name and they can make that pilgrimage. These, obviously you've got Menin Gate there's about 54,000 odd names on there from the missing around the Ypres area, and the Thiepval Memorial on the right hand side, which is our largest memorial to the missing from the Somme area, and there's 72,000 names on those memorials. So this, the scale of that is just huge. Most of you probably would recognise those memorials. What's interesting, what I think is interesting, is that the naval memorials in this country, there's 3 of them, I'll talk about those in a moment, were actually finished and unveiled before the Menin Gate or Thiepval. So these were the first memorials to the missing that the Commission actually kind of finished and were able to unveil. Now, of course, Kent has got all of those connections across both world wars as the gateway to Europe in terms of docks, airfields, training bases, hospitals. So there are a large amount, there's 26,000 commemorations in the historic county of Kent, so casualties that we commemorate here from both wars. 18,500 of those are on the Chatham Naval Memorial. So that's a really large, there's still a lot beyond that, but that's a very large percentage are on that memorial to the missing. The Navy, of course, played a huge part, particularly at the beginning of the First World War, in terms of our defences, and around about 100, what's the figure? I've forgotten the figure, it's gone up my head. 105. Okay, so we're working on 105,000 casualties, naval casualties from both wars. 63% of those are commemorated on a memorial like this in this country. So that's huge, isn't it? So there's 3 of these. This is Chatham. There's one in Portsmouth and there's one in Plymouth, and they are identical in design. Again, the idea was for those to be, as our headstones and cemeteries are uniform, that the idea being here for these naval casualties, that those memorials were also of a uniform design. So there's that idea of equality in death still being carried out in those memorials. This is the First World Memorial, which is the one that's very prominent. As I was driving here today, I was scanning, I could see it sticking out across the top of the trees. And this was unveiled, as you can see there, April the 26th, 1924. So it's in its centenary year this year, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. We had a lovely event up there earlier this year. So this was designed by Sir Robert Lorimer, who had done quite a lot of work for the Commission, and this memorial and the other 2, they were all unveiled in 1924 by various members of the royal family. In our archive, you can see on the left-hand side here, we hold lots of the original, there's loads of fascinating things in our archive, a lot of which has now been digitised, but some of the things I find really interesting to have a look at are the architectural plans for some of the memorials and for the cemetery designs. And you can see the design of the First World War Memorial there. And then there's just a picture of the beautiful detail at the top of that there with the globe. The design is based on like a rostral column, so like a kind of Roman naval victory design, which, you know, obviously lends itself very nicely to what this memorial is there for. The Second World War extension, sadly, the Second World War came along, and all that work that had literally only just been completed from the First World War, that huge job sadly had to begin again. And the Second World War extension is the walls that surround that original First World War column that was designed by Sir Edward Morph. And you've got the really lovely naval figures that kind of stand watch around there. And now, if this works, keep your fingers crossed, because there is actually a little bit of video footage of the Duke of Edinburgh unveiling the Chatham Memorial. Let's see if this is going to play. Is it going to work? No. Any IT support? No? Okay, anyway, there's a really lovely video on YouTube. It's about 2 minutes long. Look it up when you get home, because it's actually really, what's interesting for me about it is obviously being able to see that memorial unveiled. And you can actually see on the screenshot here, there's a lot of kind of panning out to the crowd, and as you can see, there are lots of obviously members of bereaved families in attendance there, in a way that, you know, obviously there aren't when we go and visit these places now. And I think that immediacy of why that memorial was there, and you're able to see the effect of that very clearly, and it would have been lovely for me to show you, but you can have that little treat later. Okay, so again, these are just a couple of the documents that we hold from in our archive. There's a copy there of the Order of Ceremony from that unveiling, and a copy of the Duke of Edinburgh's speech, again, which you can access via our archive online if you're interested in having a look at those. Okay, so in terms of the memorial itself, if we think about who these missing are, you know, we could be here all day talking about fascinating stories of casualties here. So just aim to give you a little flavour, because I don't want to overrun for the raffle, obviously. There's 3 VC winners on there. One of the youngest casualties died aboard his ship in September of 1914. Let me just remember his name. All of them have got names like George Brown. There's about 3 variations, aren't there, of George? Thank you, Tony, for backing me up there. Where are we? Midshipman Geoffrey George Gore Brown. He was aged only 15, September 1914, when his ship was torpedoed in the North Sea. So he's the youngest casualty on that memorial. At the other end, we have the Honourable Lionel John Olive Lambert. They've got such long names. DSO, who died aged 67. So again, Martin was talking in his, if you were in here for the Somme talk, you know, we're very used to hearing the stories of young casualties, but, you know, I agree with what Martin was saying, you know, 67, I'd like to think I'd be sat at, you know, at home with my feet up, having a cup of tea and a few biscuits, not dying on the retreat from Dunkirk when your ship is blown up by a mine, which is sadly what happened to him. Different obviously you can see from there, several different nationalities represented. We are the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, obviously we were Imperial War Graves Commission, and that is represented there by the different nationalities. Here you go. What about these for names? So, Frederick George and George Frederick Brown. So these two, there are, and again, this is one of those kind of facts that when we do these kind of talks and tours, and my volunteers and friends who do this kind of stuff with me will no doubt agree. Every story is a tragic one, of course it is, but there are some that just hit in a different way, or there's certain details of some that just, you know, they're the ones that just get to you and you remember them One of the facts about Chatham, and these two in particular, excuse me, is that there are at least 20 sets of brothers commemorated just on that one memorial. 20 sets of brothers, which I sat there earlier thinking that's another thing for us to research, Tony, isn't it? 20 sets of brothers, and these two were twins. Frederick George and George Frederick, because clearly the parents weren't that fussed about remembering which one was which, I don't think. So these two were from London, Hanwell in London, and they joined up together in 1912. They joined the Navy together, and they were serving together aboard the HMS Pathfinder when again their ship was sunk by a German submarine, again very early on in the war, September of 1914. And obviously they are commemorated next to each other on one of the panels on the memorial there. There are a large number of women commemorated on the memorial, and when you sign up after this to go on one of Tony's wonderful tours, which I will mention later at the end, one of the things I know he's looking at in particular at the moment, which pleases me very much, is researching into some of the other women. We know some of the female stories on there, but not all of them. These two, along with another nurse, who've we got there, Eliza and Maud, so it's Olive, who we don't have a picture of, Olive Rowlett. These nurses died on the 30th of December 1915. They were nurses from the Queen Alexandra Royal Nursing Service, the Naval Nursing Service, and they were serving on the HMS Drina. They'd been invited onto the Natal. They were all docked up in Scotland. And they'd been invited onto this other boat to kind of take part to watch a film and enjoy some Christmas festivities with some local people and some children. And during that party, the ammunition on that boat exploded without warning, and a series of explosions ripped the ship apart. It sank within 5 minutes. It was a huge tragedy. So there were some survivors. About 170 survivors were rescued from what would have been absolutely freezing cold water. However, about 420 casualties who sadly lost their lives, including the three nurses from the Drina, two of whom we have photographs of here. Eric Revilius is probably one of the highest profile. There are a number of quite well-known people commemorated on Chatham, particularly sportsmen. Eric Revilius, I'm particularly interested because I really love his art, and I'm based in Sussex, and I really love his Sussex paintings. So he died in 1942. If you're not aware of who Revilius was, he was an artist who became a war artist during the Second World War. He was posted for a time here, and then went on to accept a posting out in Iceland, of all places, in 1942. When he arrived out there, he was invited to go out on a flight, search and rescue flight, looking for a plane that had not returned from a mission the day before. Their plane also never returned from that mission. It's not known what happened. Revilius's body was never recovered, and therefore he is, as a missing person, he is recorded. His name is recorded on the Naval Memorial here. Okay, that was his Manning port for administrative purposes. When you joined the Navy, you were allocated to one of those, Plymouth, Portsmouth, or Chatham, and because he is registered with Chatham, that's why his name is here. Now I definitely need my notes for this one, because this guy, he did so much stuff I can't possibly remember it all. So this is Mike Cumberledge, and he is another one of the Second World War casualties. And having had a little look at him again earlier this week, next time I do this talk, I'm definitely putting some more photos on this slide, because he was really cool. Really cool. I mean, you can kind of tell, can't you? But there's loads of photos of him kind of swanning around, looking very suave and a bit like he should be in a James Bond movie or something. So he came from a seagoing family. Before the war, he skippered ocean-going yachts for wealthy Americans. Come 1940, he served in several undercover roles for the Royal. So he kind of really is James Bond, isn't he? For the Royal Navy. He was posted to Egypt as part of the Special Operations Executive in 1941. And he was involved in a number of kind of para-naval actions in Greece, attacking the Corinth Canal. This is why I've got to read it. He escaped from Crete. He was wounded. He returned 3 times to Crete, kind of secretly. On a second mission to destroy the Corinth Canal in 1943, he was captured and sent to concentration camp. He was there, and as far as we're aware, spent around 21 months in solitary confinement before he was finally executed in the spring of 1945. So yeah, very, very sad end, but a very kind of exciting life. He clearly wasn't afraid of danger, unlike me. Okay, and now we're going to embarrass poor old Rita, who is actually here with us today, which has just popped up, which is wonderful. So I mentioned at the start, just to finish, we had the 100th anniversary, obviously, of the memorial this year, which coincided with the campaign that the Commission were doing for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And so we held a joint, I don't know if any of you came along. If you didn't, you missed out. We had a lovely event up there in May, where we were really, really honoured actually to have Rita with us, who features there, and Flora, who is one of the sea cadets. So the idea behind the torch passing that you can see there is very much, and I've spoken to several people about this today already actually, this idea that the generation, as you will know from having watched any of the commemorations this year, that the generation who served in the Second World War, we were in this situation with the First World War, weren't we, where we are about to pass beyond living memory of some of these events. And the idea behind this campaign was to pass on that torch to the next generation, kind of literally and metaphorically. And so we held a series of events all around the country, but the one that we had at Chatham was particularly lovely. And Rita was we were absolutely delighted to have Rita join us. Rita had been on one of Tony, who is the tour guide, our volunteer tour guide at Chatham. She'd just popped up one day and kind of gone, "Hello, I'm Rita, and actually my dad's on this memorial." And of course we'd all gone, "Oh, really?" And so we'd invited Rita along to come and be the person. It seemed really fitting, as somebody with a relative on that memorial, that she should be the person they're passing on that torch. I'm sorry, Rita, if I'm embarrassing you, but Rita's story is fascinating. One of the things that she told Tony on that first meeting was that she had actually been in attendance at the unveiling of the Second World War memorial that I showed you earlier in 1952. And I won't say how old you were then, Rita. We'll keep that one secret. She spoke to both Tony and myself really movingly about what an important part that memorial had played in her family's life, and that ability to be able to visit there. And obviously they had done that on a very regular basis, attending the remembrance services up there. And so it was absolutely wonderful to be able to have that living connection with, very often when you visit a memorial, it's a building. Yes, it's about people, but it was lovely to have Rita there and her family, and for them to be able to, for us to be able to see that it really does mean something very important to the people who are remembered on there. And we've kept in touch since then, haven't we, Rita, a little bit? And we've got a little mutual fan club going on now, I think, haven't we? I think it's fair to say it was wonderful that she's here today. Rita's father sadly lost his life on the HMS Harvester in 1943. Again, another ship that was torpedoed. And of course, Rita, didn't really know her father. So having this connection was something really special for all of us, I think, to be able to be involved in, which I thought would be a nice way to end the little talk today. And of course, you have to book a tour. We do offer free tours of the Chatham Naval Memorial. You can see Tony there. He's standing just at the back looking... Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. I'll try and take some better photos next time. We do offer lots of free talks and tours across all of the southeast, but Tony does a wonderful, all of those stories and the research I've talked about today, I've just stolen from him. So, and he's constantly researching and looking at the casualties on there. His tour up there is wonderful. So if you're interested in doing that and learning some more of those stories, then you can book those through our website.